Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the September 21st Urban Renewal Commission meeting. And Nancy, would you poll us, please?
Commissioner Neely?
Here.
Commissioner Nacita?
Here.
Commissioner Rock? Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Yates? Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Commissioner Mum?
Here.
Commissioner Edgar?
Here.
And Vice Chair Shaw?
Here.
Chair Walters?
Commissioner Yates indicated that he would not be here.
That's correct.
Okay, we will move on to citizen comments pertaining to, we have none, okay?
I have none.
We can adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
No vote necessary.
Thank you. All right, general business. First item here tonight is the Clackamas Cove project. Can we have a commission report, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. Tonight, at our last meeting, we had a brief presentation from the developers for the Cove project, an update on where it was. We've reserved some extra time tonight to walk through a more detailed presentation, as well as in the packet that you received, we outlined the request being made by the developers concerning an extension of the conditional reinstatement agreement. We also included in that packet a redlined version of the detailed development and disposition agreement, as well as comments from Steve Janik, our attorney. So tonight, the developers will be making a presentation on the property. We are requesting some additional time. There's been quite a bit of work going on with both the city and the developer on this project over the last year during that conditional reinstatement agreement. Just due to the current economic situation that we're in, what we're seeing, as well as just working through the plan and needing to make some amendments to that plan, which just took time and several reviews, not only by the developers but also our staff and our consultants to work through that. We have requested that we do continue this matter. I think after the presentation, we can obviously ask any questions while the presentation is going on, but there are a couple alternatives that we could move forward with tonight that we can discuss after the presentation as we're wrapping up before we do make a decision on how to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ed and Randy to go ahead and start their presentation unless you have questions.
I have a quick question, Tony. In your recommended action of the commission report, you're talking about bringing it back at the December 7th meeting. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Correct.
Okay. And what can you just kind of explain the timing on that?
Well,
Because that's like 2 months.
yes, and realizing that we need to get our information out a week before that hearing date. As outlined in Mr. Janik's email, there are some things that we need to work through, and there's going to be some amendments. We're just allowing enough time that we think is sufficient to make sure that we can get all this wrapped up and back to you with a recommendation for either how to move forward, not to move forward, or any adjustments that should be made at that point. So we feel that's just because of the timing, the holidays, the meeting schedule, that allows sufficient time to get that done properly. And I guess I'd also say, a lot of, as I stated earlier, a lot of work has gone into this already. We're to afford the developers, make sure that we review what they've proposed adequately and get back to you with a good recommendation. That's why that date was chosen.
Thank you.
Okay. Ed and Randy, welcome this evening, and go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. We're pleased to report that after our meeting 2 weeks ago, we did not have one negative comment.
Nor do you have an opportunity to receive any.
Yeah, you have to turn your phone on, Randy.
I do agree with one of Rocky's statements 2 weeks ago that there really hadn't been enough time. And if you think about that, if you meet twice a month for a couple hours, and the gravity and the scale of things that we're doing, that's probably not enough time to get everything done. We have some of our team here this evening that I'd like to introduce briefly, and then after our presentation, they'll have a few comments. Aaron Weigard is with Marathon Acquisition and Development, our new partner. We're pleased to have them on board. Lloyd Hill with Hill Architects, and Michael Serbone with WRG Design is our civil engineer and landscape architect firm. And Jerry Herman and his entourage comprise a committee that was set up a while back to look at ways of increasing the quality of the habitat. So we're pleased to have their input as well. Before I begin, a few key points. What we're about here really is three items: economic development, habitat enhancement, and recreational opportunities. And in terms of economic development, that turns into jobs, jobs, jobs. And the estimated number of workers in an office building averages about 5 per 1,000 square feet. So on our proposed 80,000 square feet building, that would equal 400 permanent jobs. The smaller office building, which is 58,400 square feet, that would be about 290 jobs. And altogether, that's 690 permanent jobs. And depending upon what kind of employment multiplier one likes to use, that could be up to like 3,450 jobs. Now, the difficult thing about the office is we don't know when that market would turn around. Right now, the suburban office market is in very bad shape, very high vacancy rates. But eventually, that will happen, and there will be quite a bit of employment. There will be quite a bit of temporary employment in the two residential sections, the apartment site, 210 units, and the the condominiums that will be built as condos but leased. There's 196 units there, and together that's about 400 units. And if you looked at what's the population growth going to do there, if you set an average of about 2 people per household, varies up and down from that. But that could ultimately result in a population of upwards of 1,000 people. If you think about what 1,000 people right next to downtown within trolley distance or walking distance when the weather's nice, if you really wanted to do something great for the downtown area, it would be to keep this project going. The other items, the habitat enhancement program, there's several things that are going on there. We're implementing the David Evans plan, which was to save some of the cottonwoods along the river, along the edge of the bank, and we obviously need to take some soil away from the top of the bank to build the pads up high enough so they're not within the 100-year flood elevation. So we're working on that. We've worked with Tony out in the field and identified trees that'll stay and trees that won't. And we've done that also with our civil engineers in terms of locating things. And we now have landscape plans that pretty accurately indicate the David Evans approach.
Just a quick side there. Michael Serbone, who is with WRG, is with us, and he can talk to that section which shows how we're going to do that waterfront. It's kind of an exaggerated drawing in terms of what's there, but the intent is to be able to take and surround those trees that are capable of surviving it and creating a retaining wall to the back side and then actually making them stick around. So that's a very important thing. So Michael can talk to that. When Randy brought up Lloyd Hill, we worked with him on several projects in the past. When we went out with an RFP to do the condos, and they were as condos, not as apartments, we selected Hill out of 5 different entities that we'd work with. And, you know, when you look at doing an apartment project, usually the numbers go way down, and it's probably 1/3 the cost of doing a condo project because of all the detailing that has to go in, the higher quality. So we are contracted for condominiums, not for apartments. There's been an issue, and I think Rocky has brought this up several times. So we asked Lloyd to come by to discuss that because his contract is written as condominiums. He is currently doing other projects which are out there that are being exactly the same thing. They're designed as condos, but they're going to lease them. When it turns around, and they'll actually have them ready to go. So that's a quick aside.
Okay. The final thing on the habitat enhancement is that we will be planting over 1,000 new trees and over 3,450 new shrubs as a part of the landscape plan. So there's a lot going on there. In terms of recreation, we're doing a lot. The area seems so underutilized now, utilized only by the trail, but you rarely see somebody out on the water. There's actually some little hidden beaches down there that people probably have never seen. And so we're going to make all that stuff more accessible to people and make it something that people can be proud of in terms of not only the trails and pathways and parks and amphitheaters for concerts in the park, but also on the water activities with a water sports center and opportunities for kids to learn about sailing or small boat rowing or other kinds of water related activities. So that's just a quick summary. Seems important if you're going to pick somebody to do your redevelopment project that they have a lot of experience in that area. We think that we probably have more experience doing mixed-use waterfront planned developments than anybody in the area. We've done Oswego Point in Lake Oswego on the Willamette River, River Bend, which is right next door to that, Tidewater Cove on the Columbia River in Vancouver, and South Shore down at Newport. And we want to show on the PowerPoint some of those projects.
I think the main thing that we were looking to, I went through Janik's letter and I sent you out my comments to that. It was quite a lengthy dissertation there, and a lot of it very valid. The main thing that we're requesting is basically to change from one phase to another phase. And that has a lot of implications, not only from how it gets built, what the risks are to you, and how we'll actually get it done. So if you break it down, that's basically what we're requesting, and then a 9-month extension to actually get that done. And the 9 months, it actually goes a little bit beyond where we need to go, because it's our expectation in talking with our new partners that we'd actually like to break ground in April. We'd like to get through the weather. It's anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000 of additional cost to do this work, all the moving of the dirt during the winter. So we prefer not to do that. So the intent is to look at that time frame. We're more than willing to sit down in this period of time where we could come up with milestones. We're always working to milestones, and we'd be willing to be obligated to do milestones during that 9-month period. So that we're not just sitting on the sideline. We have never sat on the sidelines. We did have some other partners that were sitting on the sidelines and didn't get their work done, but that's not our approach. We want to build it. We don't make any money until we build it, so it's been a long time committed to this project and a lot of capital. So the intent is to push it forward as fast as possible. With that, I'll jump into the PowerPoint here. The expectation, obviously, as Randy went through, is to create the new jobs. The parks, as you know, we have basically 2 pretty good parks in this, the Esplanade area and then the North Park. And looking at the site plan over here, this is about 6 acres, and this property here is about 3 acres, which will allow for the connecting of the trail system and then an amphitheater and an open area here that gives access to the water. And Randy already brought up the enhancement. Every project that we've done that are of this size, that's what we do. We go in and make sure that we're either adding to or we're enhancing what's already there. And then the sustainable practices, you might mention those quickly, Randy.
The light impact design, the LID, involves primarily ways of dealing with stormwater and rain gardens and biofiltration swales and all the things that are necessary to make sure that the water quality stays good. The water will be adequately treated. The runoff from the roofs and the parking areas will all go through biofiltration systems before and flow spreaders before they get back down to the cove.
When I stated that we haven't been sitting on the sidelines since our prior partners declined to move forward with the apartments, we sat down and we reevaluated the whole site and said, all right, what is the very best thing to kick this project off? And our conclusion, not only from our own perspective, having many, many years in this business, but actually going out and talking to third-party consultants, appraisers, and financial analysts, and also market analysts, was to take the condos and build those for rent. One of the real primary things you get out of doing that is that when you come down Main Street and come to the project, you'll see a completed project. I mean, it will look fully completed, even without the apartments being done. The apartments have an elevation of probably 10 to 12 feet above Main Street. We can take and do a full landscape of that, so when you come down, you'll see the condominiums, you'll see the esplanade, you'll see all the landscaping that goes with that. So it's a very strong image when you come into the project. It looks completed, and it'll be of a high quality. In our work effort to push that kind of a program forward, we have committed to almost $800,000 since the last time that we've met you. And that is working drawings for the architectural part, the civil, geotech, traffic, and just general and administrative. Our expectation is that the condos will require about $22 to $24 million of construction loan. Our current partners are doing almost $25 million worth of this type of product right now. They will, in fact, be in a position to roll that over. They have committed over $13 million worth of bonding. So we brought people to the table at this time that are actually in the business, doing the work, and doing exactly what we're talking about. So we're very pleased to have them as a partner. And if, in fact, there's any questions you'd like to request of them, they're available this evening. The infrastructure, one of the big drawbacks here was, from our perspective, and for even bringing a partner to the table, is to say, what's the cost of the infrastructure? So we have a $7 million commitment. We took and completed those plans in total, worked with the city, went back and forth, several red lines, and then put those out to bid. We had 3 or 4 bidders that bid it. The curve was from about $6.3 million up to $7.4 million, I believe, was our curve. That puts us right in exactly the range which we had expected and which we were hoping for, but you never know until you actually go out to the GCs and find it out. So we've got that number. It would be our intent to take and grind that down and get it to a number as low as we can, and then we'll create that as the public investment budget, which the city will review and go through. The new units on the waterfront, we had a third-party entity, Johnson & Reed, do a full market analysis of will these units rent and what will they rent for. We had projected the current market is right around $1.16 to $1.18 a foot. We expect that we can actually push these rents up to $1.24 to $1.26. And what we have done in the past, Oswego Point, other projects where we've had them on the water, we can get a premium of about $100 to $200 per unit if they're on the water. All of these units are on the water. That's a unique thing about it. And the other thing, the design of these buildings, which makes them not apartments again, is that they're single loaded. Single loaded means that when you go up in the elevator, which you don't have in an apartment project, you get off, you don't have units on both sides, you don't have a double corridor. You just walk right into your unit, and your unit's facing the water. So that plus the fact that they are fully secure, so you've got a lot of elements that make it a condominium project, not an apartment. The capital partner. We're actually going through and finalizing our revisions to the LLC agreement, and that'll be available. The original 210 apartments had a value of $23.9 roughly. That was appraised by a third-party appraiser for the bank, Wells Fargo, when Woodley Properties was involved. So when you extrapolate that appraisal out, which was for 118 units, it comes out to $23.9. What we're talking about on the 196 units is $35.5 for that value. So obviously, the first thing that we kick off will have a much greater increment. I think the biggest thing, though, is that it has this quality. It'll pull all the rest of the project up. It'll pull the 210 units up. It'll bring the office buildings up to a higher quality. So we're really excited about doing that as the first increment. The acceleration of the condos, if you consider how the condos were to be built originally, which is a mandate by the financial community, we could never have built all of those at one time. Matter of fact, you wouldn't want to. You would build them anywhere from 34, which is each building, to 68, 2 buildings at a time. And originally we had planned 2 buildings at a time. By building this all at once, we get the increment instantly, even though it might be less than the condo value. It will be done all at one time and be actually running the meter for the increment and actually the value that comes back to the city. So we're comfortable with doing that. We hope you understand how that would work. And then the other commitment that we have is that as soon as we finish those condominiums as leased units, we will kick off the 210. This is a totally different product. We've built several projects where we have multi-phase entities in it and product. In this case, a garden project like the 210, which is a 3-story walk-up, non-secure, has a much lower price point and will in fact lease and rent for a lot less money. So we can actually just kick that off, and it's a very complementary project for us to do that way. So we're looking forward to starting that directly after completing the condos. Just a quick recap, and we won't go through all the projects like we had sent you in the book, but if you take what was there at Oswego Point, it was the old Portland cement plant. We tore that down. We recycled all of the concrete. We were able to recover almost $500,000 worth of steel. And this is 20 years ago. We were doing recycling and that type of thing a long time ago. We crushed the concrete on site. We went over to this location here, which had been an area that had logs and what have you. We pushed all the concrete on top of that. We surcharged it and pushed all the water out of that so that we could actually build units. So we built 112 condominiums on this side, and we built 422 apartments. We took these old uses and we recycled those. This 3 dolphins, they're called. They are a gravity dolphin. They're just gigantic steel piling pushed down into the river and then filled with rocks and capped with concrete. So we said, the city said, well, you need to clean that stuff up. And we said, why? We'll never be able to get into the water again. Let's take and use it. So we designed a water sports center that connects right to these 3 dolphins. We came over to this dolphin and made a public access for it. And then we took this, which was a tie-up for large barges that would come in and get either concrete or bring in the raw materials for the plant. So we tore it down and we made that into an amphitheater, utilizing all the steel that was there. And then on this one here, we attached that to a restaurant that we put together up on this site. So,
I mentioned also that those were not things that the city of Lake Oswego required us to do. These were things that we saw an opportunity to create something unique and special with the Water Sports Center.
And the city actually had planned on spending almost $1 million to do these 3 dolphins here and the Water Sports Center, and we had already gone through the numbers and had bid it out. So I went into the city council and I said, I'll tell you, you give me $500,000 and I'll build it and I'll guarantee it. So that's what we ended up doing. They gave us the money, we built it, it got it out of all the cost of having to go through a public approach. So it was a very good win-win approach for the city and for ourselves. The amphitheater, as you can see here up in the top left, it's 2-dimensional, but that is a large concrete pad with grass, and then it steps up, and it had ADA approach to it. This is the dolphin that was round. We squared that off and put a big pad there, and then we put in a ramp that goes up to the restaurant. This is the water sports center here, which has the boats, has the tie-ups. 3 high schools use that at this time for doing sculling. The lower left picture over here shows how it looks in an elevation form. Because of the success of this amphitheater, the city came in and just south of the property that we had, built a big giant park specifically for an amphitheater. And this whole area here now is used for that. Our amphitheater was on a Wednesday night, and it was so crowded that they were bringing buses down and people down to enjoy it. And it was actually done not so much as a cost of the city. They brought a gal in that just coordinated it as a compliment to the city. So it was a good project for that. After we completed the Oswego Point project, which is outlined here, which is the apartments, the condos, the office, and the restaurant, the very first phase up here, which was about 9 buildings, the city was able to borrow $4.6 million under their increment approach, and they did the whole downtown street, which is Lake Oswego. Subsequent to us completing that, the city manager called me and asked me if we would build out this piece of property, which we ended up doing. 32 high-end condominiums. These went from $800,000 to $2.5 million. The main reason the city wanted us to do it, they wanted to get the connectivity and continue the path system. So at the very outset, we agreed that we would give them that path. They came back to us again about 3 years later and asked if we would build out this property, which was a single-family detached. We said we would do it. In that particular case, the property was for sale for $1,175,000, very expensive for a one little house sitting there. I said, I'll do it. If the city will put up 1.1, I'll put up 75, and I'll do all the design work. We did that. We got it approved, moved it through. We ended up spinning it off to another developer because it was such a small deal, but we did it as a compliment for the city. So now the system here of pathways is almost 3,000 feet, ultimately going down to George Rogers Park. So it was a good give back. Because of this effort that we did here, we put in a lot of paths up to Albertsons and this commercial area. Within 1 year after us completing this, they completely redid this whole shopping center and turned it into a next grade, higher grade. So it was an upgrade there. Currently, the city is looking at doing this property over here, which is industrial, and doing it as a mixed use. They asked us if we would do it. I said we're too busy right now with what we're doing. Before we closed down a lot of our additional work, we had 4 projects. This was one of them. We shut all those other ones down because of what's happening in the marketplace. Let's focus on one project. So that's what we're doing. We're totally focused on the Cove. But the nice thing about this is that one project spurred all of these other projects and then this ultimate new park. Tidewater Cove was a project that was under development for probably 10 years before we were involved. It was the Hickey family out of Vancouver. They run all the barges up and down Tidewater Cove, run the garbage out of Portland, very successful company. But they had alienated so many people in their design concepts that they could not get it approved. They asked us to joint venture with them. I said, well, we would buy it, but we wouldn't joint venture because there was just too many conflicts. We had done our homework with the city and with the local community that was very much against it. So we ended up entering into a purchase agreement, and it took us 14 months to get it approved, fully approved, and get it ready to go. So, and the reason that we were able to do that, and it's one of Randy's gifts, if you will, is that we sat down and listened to all the complaints, all the issues. And one of the biggest problems with this project was that people who were up here on the hill were looking out to the Columbia, and they were putting 3-, 4-, and 6-story buildings all across here, which literally blocked off 50% of their view. So we sent the engineers up on the hill and said, do the geometry, tell us what's the height that we can do and still preserve all our views. So there wasn't anything that we could do if we put them all along here. So we said, all right, let's create a whole new wetlands. Let's push the buildings back and create that visual corridor. And when we showed them, we did full drawings that were three-dimensional, showed the people that were in the area. They went, we can buy into this. So we actually, instead of having them as detractors or negative, they bought into the project and supported us. Once again, we have a large mixed-use project here. This is a total of 84 acres. Office buildings here, additional condos here. The unique thing about this project is that this went right through the crisis period and sold. It is a very unique quality project. It has all of the same architectural qualities that we're going to be doing on these condos, and it just went right through. If you look at this elevation, it's very much it's very close to what we are doing on this particular project. And kind of show you the interiors. The main thing that we have done by doing so many waterfront projects, you want to have three primary things on the view. You want to have the kitchen on the view, you want to have the dining, and you want to have the master bedroom. That usually requires anywhere from 30 to 42 feet of frontage to get that kind of an area. We are addressing that and doing that in this project. Interiors quality in terms of countertops, cabinets, because these are condos. Switching to South Shore, this project over 100 acres. We had very substantial detractors in the book that we sent you. I sent you a letter of recommendation from Fran Reck, who actually was very, very competent, very strong advocate against the project. We spent a lot of time working with her. When we finally got her support, because we did a lot of things by preserving the wetlands, we actually had her come out every month. I told her what we were going to do the next month, and then if you have any problems with what we're going to do that next month, talk to me right now, and then at the end of the month I want you to write a report on how we did. So that went on through the whole project. So she became a very good supporter, and we did exactly what we said we'd do. It's a big project. We had 35 acres of wetland, which we could have filled, we could have mitigated, we could have created a little pond. We said, no, we'll keep that, and we actually went through, and Randy, you might give them some background.
Well, we talked with our wildlife biologist and said, what could we plant there that would increase the population support capability of that little ecosystem? And they came up with a list, and we did the planting and we did the monitoring to make sure that the new plantings survive. But we had a funny response from somebody at State Fish and Game when we were working with them, and they said, "You're doing what?" He says, "Developers never do that." Again, this wasn't something the city was requiring us to do, or that we had to do to get permits. It was just something like we felt it would be a good thing to do.
The other thing that Randy did, he bought several books for everybody that bought into the project that were on how to plant, how to protect the dunes, a lot of the things. And instead of making them, upset about not being able to go across the dunes and wherever they wanted, they actually became stewards of that resource. So it worked out very well. These are just some of the product that we put there. We had 7 single-family detached. We had 65 condominiums and 100 cottages.
The cottage on the right there is sort of typical of the new urbanism, the idea of putting front porches and porch swings and picket fences and things that create a friendlier neighborhood. And we started doing that, I think, before it even became popular.
Actually, I flew back to Nantucket and took about 1,000 pictures, and then we put out an RFP to architects in this community and in Seattle. We ended up picking an architect in Seattle who had done a lot of smaller residences for Buchan, I believe was the developer up there. Mm-hmm. And they just did them really very nice. So we took this design element, if you will, and then just had them package it around what they had done on other projects. You can see the wetland in this picture. We created additional wetlands on the site. This is one of the projects of Marathon, another large project. It has a lot of the same complements that we're doing on our project here. It has offices up in this area, has retail, has a park area, has apartments and condominiums. As I mentioned earlier, they're currently under construction with over $25 million worth of product, and they have this capacity to do the bonding also. The status of the project at this point is, in terms of approvals, we've got the master plan approved, we've got the conceptual development plan for the entire project, we have detailed development plan, which is the last major step before going to building permit, phase 1 and 2 infrastructure, and we're modifying that to accommodate this change on the condos. And the real change on the condo site is that we are taking the subterranean parking out and putting at-grade parking. And uniquely, and Michael wasn't the engineer, Michael Cervone here wasn't the engineer that was working on it, but I said, I want to take that parking out and bring it back up to grade, because that's $25,000 a parking space. That's almost $8 million that it takes out of the condos that makes them actually leasable at this point. The engineer that I was working with at WRG said, well, it's not going to work. I spent 2 weeks doing my little engineering workup, and I went back and I said, I'll bet you lunch. So I ended up getting a free lunch. But the idea there was to take that subterranean parking out and then get the grading done so that it would accommodate the parking at grade. We have a full detailed development plan for the garden apartments and the waterfront condos. That's pending. One of the things which we are requesting of you is to, as the owner of that property, is to sign the DDP application. The city staff will not work on that until the owner signs it. You still have this opportunity to come back and review it and approve it, but it actually has to go through the staff level. So if we accomplish something tonight, we'd like to get you to sign off on that. And if you're not comfortable doing that this evening, maybe staff can bring something back to you quickly that would actually allow that to move forward, because that is a major element. We've done the homework, we've done the drawings, we need to get it in so that staff can do the homework on it. On the DDA, we completed all the contingency period 1 items, and I sent you that as a backup to Steve's comments. The revisions that we're making under that is for the condos versus the apartments. The contingency period 2 items, a lot of that, some of them are pretty perfunctory, which we need to do, like a parking agreement, getting the Tri-Cities lease done, those items. The conditional reinstatement really kind of regurgitates the DDA requirements, and then obviously we need to get you to approve our new partner. This is the overview of the project. We all know what is in it. The 210 are here. This is the mixed-use site. And uniquely, this site is really a bad site. It is currently at a grade of about 32 to 35 feet, way below the 100-year flood. It has got a bunch of junk in there below about 5 feet. We believe that we can pick off the top part to save that, but we have to export the balance of it, because what this is a borrow site, even though we're not going to take and use the dirt, it creates the volume of space that for the floodplain that allows us to put dirt on the 210 site. The balance of the site, which is the 6 buildings for the condos, these are 34 units each, as the parking here, and this is the parking, which is the Tri-City piece, and the 80,000 square feet of office. The park over here, which would have the amphitheater and the access down to the water sports center. Some of the new elements would be the new business and employment for the mixed-use building, the new trailhead, which was brought up by Doug Neely, that's incorporated into the plan. The public marinas, which we would hold off on till one of the latter phases, and either build that as we have a market for it, or build part of it and actually have it for public use. The 210 apartments, Randy brought up the employment that will come from these different uses, the office buildings, 400 people or so. We're completely redoing Agnes, doing the turnaround here. The opportunity out in front here because of the width. From 200 feet on each side of the center here, this esplanade is 20 feet wide. That would allow for a Saturday market. It would allow for shows. It can be used for a number of things, and that's kind of the intent at that level. These are just visuals on some of the things that we saw. This one down in the far right-hand corner over here, where my pointer went, this is at Oswego Point. There would be boats pull up here to just listen to the music. This area would get totally packed. We have the Water Sports Center again, and the access for just sitting around and enjoying a quiet day. The different uses, and it really is creating a lifestyle here at the project. Additional images that are from some of our projects and other projects. The Water Sports Center is really a kind of a give back. It won't have the opportunity for sculling like we do on the river, the Willamette, but it can have the small sailboats. It can teach water safety to the kids, so it's a real opportunity for the community to get involved. This is a section here, and I think one of the more important parts, which was one of Jim's and Asita's primary concerns, is how do we save some of these trees. Randy and Tony Conkle with others have gone down there. They've selected the trees. We had the engineers go out, plot those trees on our plan, and then look at how they can save them. And the way that they'll save them, even though this is somewhat exaggerated, is to take and surround them with a rockery that comes up and actually protects them. So that's the concept for preserving those trees. This is kind of what's out there right now. These steel columns that are in the water right now, this is a real opportunity, once again, to not throw it away or cut them off or pull them out, but to create some decking here that people can go out and use just to swim out to and jump off of, to enjoy the water. So that would be our intent there. Some of the mess that's out there at this point that needs to be cleaned up. On the 210, there's a lot of concrete. This piece here is located right in this area. That needs to be taken out. There's a lot of hazards out there right now that just need to be squared away, and obviously that'd be one of our first increments of
Could I
work.
interrupt you? Could you go back to that
Yes.
slide? The area that you're talking about, and I don't know if the building footprint actually goes out to that point or not, whether in fact you can create a viewing pad out of the material that's there, as opposed to removing it. That's
Yes.
a question.
No, I think that even going back, that area specifically is not designed for a viewing location. We've looked at that. We'd just as soon take it out and clean it up. And when you go to the master plan, this area right here has all that complement designed into it, and you'll see that in just a second. And that would be in this center part of the project right here. The elevations of the condos, I think once again, Jim, you had brought this up. You said you'd like to see the units change in scale. We reduced the size of the buildings. We went out to the market again and said, all right, how are we going to build these condos in this market? When we had originally designed the buildings, we were up at a couple thousand square feet a unit, which is not the market. That's come down substantially. So in doing that, we not only shrunk the buildings in length, we had approximately anywhere from 30 to 40 feet between the buildings. Now we have 80 feet between the buildings. That's phenomenal. That opens up the streetscape to be able to see out. We do have these garages over here. We have 32 garages. Ultimately, the intent when we convert would be to come across here and actually add some additional garages, because that's part of an upgrade approach. In the back, they'll be set back enough to where the corridor for people walking by won't impose upon the livability of the units. And when you say, well, are we really building condos? The concept is what we've got designed at this point through Lloyd Hill. This is Tidewater Cove. You can see a lot of similarities in it, and these units at Tidewater Cove were larger in a market that was a different point in time, but those units sold from about $250,000 up to $4.5 million. Phenomenal price swing there, and it sold during the bad economic time because it is a very unique, very low density project. These are typical apartment finishes where you'd use kind of a faux granite or PLAM. These are the finishes that you use in a condo. And we have done these types of conversions. We sit down and we have one guy who coordinates that with the buyer. He actually gets a percentage of those upgrades, so he's got an incentive to talk them into doing this and doing that. It becomes a very unique profit center for us also. But he goes through and says, all right, we can take out the cabinets, we can take out the flooring, we can do this, we can do that. The big thing on designing the condos in terms of the structural integrity and the structural livability is the way you design the common walls and the vertical sound tracking. So when you do an apartment, you don't worry about that so much because people listen to their neighbors. But when you're doing a condo, it doesn't work. The homeowners group will come back, they'll sue you, it'll never work. So we design the right kind of systems and sound quality into these units that you do into a condominium. Then when you come back to actually doing the upgrades, it's really a matter of just fenestrations, things that you add after the fact. You can pull out a cabinet, you can pull out the flooring, you can add all that. And usually we restrict where the hard surfaces go to entry areas, maybe a kitchen. But we don't like to have the whole place hard surface because that transmits sound. So usually we'll put a prohibition in against doing that. But you can see this quality. This particular unit was $4.5 million, and the other units were like $1.5 million to $2 million. But you can do whatever you want. You can actually kind of go crazy here. So, and some people do that. We like to see them put their money back into circulation. Johnson Reed was the entity that we hired to do the market analysis of the condos for lease. It confirmed our beliefs. It's always nice when they confirm what you hoped they'd confirm. And in this case, they took all of the units in the area, and some of them even out of the area, down as far as Wilsonville and up into the Clackamas, and came up with those as comps, and then said, all right, given this economic time and the quality of what you're doing, you can get this kind of a premium. So we actually believe that we can actually get more than they're suggesting, just because it's going to be a very nice project. That report is also available if you'd like the full copy. The apartments, 210 apartments. These we've built probably 10,000 of these types of units in different states over the last 45 years. They're very straightforward. They are nice units. Everybody gets a nice visual corridor out, but they do have the loading through the center. Right here, you come up between the units and you go up and you kind of walk around to get to these units. These units are 2 stories on the end. You have an access over here, and then you walk up to the next one. But they're still very, very nice units. At the outset, during the infrastructure work, we would not build the 210, but we would take and do the roadway there contiguous to the apartments, so that when you come down Main Street, coming from the Willamette, headed east, if you will, you won't feel like the project is partially done. It will look totally done. You'll see this kind of landscaping. We did this at Merrillhurst. This was in Lake Oswego. We had originally planned a large wall that was going to go across here, a brick wall that would have had a lot of planning, what have you. We ended up with additional dirt on the site. We went back to the city and said, if you'll allow us to do this berm landscaping, we'll put in all new lights that'll be the gateway to the city. They agreed to do that. it saved us $250,000 even with us putting in all the lights for the city. So it was once again a good program of public and private. This did not get updated, and I apologize. We just didn't get enough time to drop in the new buildings. These are the older buildings, which, as you can see, are 5 stories. One of the things which, again, Jim had brought up, can you get those down? They're nice-looking buildings, but they were pretty monumental. This is the office complement. This isn't necessarily a requirement. One of the things that you like to do, if you have visibility to a freeway, you like to do something that's monumental, that lets people know where the project is. So that's a possibility, but this represents 80,000 square feet. It could be broken into one of the 4 quads here that we can actually open up earlier than just doing the whole project. So we have that kind of flexibility designed into that 80,000 square feet. The front of it is what I was talking about to you, Doug, is this becomes a public courtyard area. This is substantial. Access down here is substantial. The ability to use this whole court area will be, in fact, public, and that's part of was in the DDA that when we developed this site, that we would get some assistance in terms of the pricing. All the money that we spent here would help reduce that cost when we take that down. So the intent is, again, once again, to do public give back. It could be a very active area. The mixed-use building at 58,400 is designed with 2 restaurants, one at each side. This is a pretty spectacular view quarter that you get at this location, even though it's a pain in the neck site. One of the things that will have to be done there, a double podium will have to be put in. When we did our original estimates, it was close to $4 million to do that. The approach with the city was that if, in fact, we have to spend all this money to bring it up to a buildable site, that would be a reduction to the cost of the dirt. So it actually comes out, when we ran numbers, that it becomes kind of a push that if somebody we can bring to the table. We've actually designed a 132 unit hotel here also that's concepted. We haven't shared that with anybody here, but we've gone to a couple of those entities. Apartments and hospitality are still strong in the market right now. So that's a potential that we could bring that would actually eliminate this use, but that would be a nice complement to the project. The Esplanade at the very right at this location right here, as you're looking back this way, and that's what this picture is. So we have the Water Sports Center, we have the park, and you're looking back to the meandering trail that goes down across in front of the condos. The Water Sports Center isn't a major cost item. It's just really needs to be done so that you can have classes there, and we can get the boats in there that the kids can use.
Adults can use it too, can't they?
Yes. And these are just concept things on the amphitheater. It'll basically be a grass-type amphitheater. So what we're proposing is that we'll, obviously we hope the project will become a reality. We've worked on it awfully hard and diligently for a long time. We've had a few hiccups. We don't always like to point fingers, but we were doing our job, others weren't. We'll create the new jobs. It'll be an asset to the community, and we will enhance the environment. The request to the commission is that you sign the application with the DDP, that's the condos, that you approve the revisions to the phase 1 and 2 infrastructure, and that's really basically grading. That's taking and getting rid of the subterranean parking. All these drawings are done. The city has reviewed them, the building department. They've redlined them, I think, probably 3 times. So we've got a full set of drawings. Those are the drawings we took out to bid. So that work is done. The remaining task is for the agency or the city to wrap up the deal with the Tri-Cities. That was actually put on hold by the city because they wanted to make sure that we were going to perform. We have consistently been moving things forward. It wasn't until March of this year that we actually removed our other partner, and we instantly started design work on this project. We have a joint use agreement for the parking lot. That parking lot is this piece right here, which is the Tri-City piece. That has 257 parking spaces. 50 will be for public use, and on the weekend it's going to be public use. So if we have a program going there, that whole site can be, public parking. The balance of it was to accommodate the 80,000 square feet. The infrastructure budget, even though we went out to bid and we got qualified bidders, these were probably three of the strongest guys in all of Oregon that bid this, we will go back out again and do that. We have the potential of our partner doing that. They are competent in doing that. One of the things that we like to do when we've done projects over the years, almost every project that we did, I was the general contractor on the project. I like doing that because I like to know what's below the ground and it was done right. That's one of the things which Marathon can bring to the table. They can actually do the infrastructure and do the vertical construction. Uniquely, and this is very unique in this business, is that the way that they work with partnerships is that they don't load the project with gigantic fees. They put in general conditions which cover their field people and cover their accounting and things of that nature. But a lot of times you'll see developers come in and try to take a bunch of money out of the front end of a deal. That's not their approach to doing business. We've known them for quite a while. We haven't worked with them. We actually tried to buy a large parcel that they had that they were developing. They went ahead and did it themselves, but in the course of doing that several years back, we got to know the principals very well, and they're very, very good people. So we'll get that budget finalized and in for your approval. You'll have to approve that contract, which will be a guaranteed maximum contract, meaning it's guaranteed. That'll be backed up with the bonds. And if they are a partner, obviously, and they're doing that, they're going to be online to make sure it gets done and done timely. The operating agreement, we're revising that now. That'll be available. And the way that was done in the past, that was given to Janik. Janik reviews it, reviews the financial background, and then just gives you a report that it's acceptable. Nobody actually can say, we had a very, very unbelievably large financial statement with our first partner approaching $200 million. They went bankrupt. You never know what's going on out there all the time. We have to agree on the public access. I think that's mainly a pretty straightforward deal. We want people to come to the waterfront. We do like to restrict the path to a 10 o'clock type time frame. We don't want kids running up and down there and being crazy and noisy, so we'll have some restrictions there. Likewise, we will do monuments along the pathway that talk about the history of the waterfront and what the ecology is and what the flora and the fauna are. That's a kind of a nice give back. And then we have to pull permits and we have to record a loan. That's something which we will do. It's kind of a wrap up. There was one additional thing. Let me see if I can get out of this in a This is
that frontage area, whether we're in place or you are the owner.
Let me stop this for a minute. This is October 10th when we got the extension. I presented several things, but one of the clips which I wanted to present to you was that we anticipated that we might have to make changes. Our expectation is that if we have to modify the phasing, we would like to have that incorporated into the program. So this is just kind of
it has a lot of value because it's waterfront. Whether it's condominiums, whether it's going to be offices, whether it's going to be apartments, any number of things can be done there. And obviously we are looking at alternatives because of what's happening in that market right now with condominiums. Our expectation, that's potentially 2 to 3 years out. So we are looking at those.
Just to reiterate that this isn't something new. Likewise, and get this to come up. This is
Stated. And
This is Steve Janik. I don't know if that's going to get bigger or not. Is it get bigger?
Upper right corner of your screen. Nope, nope. Of the square in the middle?
Is that it? This was Steve discussing the same concept, which was
one of the things they did not achieve before was the 220-unit apartment project had to be under construction. There had to be a construction loan recorded and the building permits issued. So they have, under this document, a year to get that done. What they brought up was they wanted more flexibility to come back to the city and say, well, we didn't start the apartments, but we are prepared to start, say, an office building component of the project. And I had two concerns about giving them that flexibility. The first concern was that we looked to the apartment project to produce a certain increment of property taxes to fit into our overall financing structure. So if they come in with a proposed different portion of the project, it has to at least have the same amount of incremental taxes being produced. The second thing that I was concerned about, though, is I have no way of knowing what they might come back with, what portion of the project. Depending upon what portion of the project they come back with, it may change the risk that you have in going forward with the deal and investing the $7 million. So what I put in here was language that said not only do they have to come in with a project of equal assessment, but there has to be no different risk to the agency and the public investment, the $7 million, than the 220-unit apartment project as determined in your sole discretion. Risk is one of those things where you can't have an objective standard. So what I'm trying to say here is, as you may recall, the $7 million was supposed to go to do all of the work necessary to prepare the entire site for redevelopment. If, for example, they come in with a project that doesn't necessarily require that you spend all $7 million all at once, that's one of those risk factors. If they were to say, well, we'd still like you to spend all $7 million because it'll make this project easier or go better for us, they may be right. But you need the opportunity to exercise your judgment if they're coming in with something different than what they had originally proposed. So that's the reasoning behind their request and the reasoning behind my response to protect your stated. And what?
Want to hear it again? I think the reason for showing those two quick clips is that a year ago we thought that there might be a necessity to make modifications, and when we've done these large projects, we always build that in. And I think the letter that I sent to you that was reviewing Janik's comments went back to our Planning Commission meeting where we specifically requested that we'd have that option, and it would be a Type 1, or was it Type 1 or Type 2? Type 1 modification. The reason that it's gone beyond that is because you need to evaluate the risk. You need to look at what we're doing. So if it hadn't been for the infrastructure dollars that you're putting up, we would have been able to just go back and say, all right, planning staff, would you approve this? This has some extraordinary appendages to it, so it needs to go through this body. In summary, we would like you to sign the DDP so that we can actually get that work in front of the staff. That's very important. For us to sit on the sidelines for 2 months while they're doing staff reports for your understanding of the overall project and what we're doing here, that needs to run in parallel with that effort. So if it's not something you can do tonight, maybe in another session you could look at that, and Tony could put that together so that we could actually move that forward. And then the other item is, we're really just changing one thing. We're going from one phase to another phase. And if you look at the condominiums, if you were to build condominiums in a good market, you would be building them over probably a 6-year time frame. In this particular case, we're going to, in fact, increase the increment almost 55% over and above what was coming out of the apartments. And then when you tag the apartments on right behind and build those out, now we're up to almost $58 million with the product. That's only $10 million away from what it takes to cover the whole increment. So it's a very win-win approach. We just want you guys to be able to understand it. It's not easy to grasp it all. We've been working on it for 5 years, and that's all we are working on, so we know it backwards and forwards. So we're open to any questions that you might have.
All right. I don't know if you want to take Jerry Herman's comment first, but.
Just wanted to introduce members of a group you never heard of before, the Heritage Waters Habitat Task Force. Doesn't that sound nice? Okay. We are a group of people, about 21 people from Oregon City, Westland, Gladstone. Some of your counselors have been involved with our efforts too, that are architects, engineers, people as directors of conservation programs, even the tourism development director for Clackamas County, I should say the tourism development chairman for Clackamas County, who are looking at various projects. In Gladstone, we're looking at Meldrum Slough, which is going to be a huge rehabilitation project that the federal government's going to be involved in. In Westland, we've been looking at Marietta Young State Park, the only state park of a wilderness park nature that is operated by a city, because State Parks feels good about that. And the people in this room, besides myself, include Lori Griffith. Lori's in the back here. She's on the picture in the front. You can see of this document, too. She's a Parks Board member from Westland. She also works with hundreds of volunteers at Marietta Young State Park. Richard Craven, you know. Probably we should thank Richard for saving the isthmus to the cove, or we wouldn't have a cove to talk about, because he got the permits for you to reinforce the cove as it was being worn away, the upper part of the north spit, shall we say, and also got the dredging permits, which have not yet been exercised, but that's his work as a fisheries and consulting biologist. John Borden used to work for Governor McCall. He just had to leave here. Was a Water Resource Division Assistant Administrator for the state of Oregon. He's a civil engineer from Westland, does all sorts of consulting work. But if you look at this list, you've got the conservation directors from the Clackamas River Basin Council and other nonprofit groups. We took an interest in this project some time ago because we felt with some encouragement, both from the developer and ourselves, we could encourage a process that would modify it, create better wildlife values, and ultimately establish a public place that I think would benefit people and wildlife. Another flyer you have in front of you is from the League of Conservation Voters. And about a year ago, they came down and had a meeting on site and were quite distressed about things that seemed to be happening at that time. About that time, you hired a new administrator who has a strong interest in the environment. And David Frazier then initiated that process with David Evans and Associates that you heard about to look at retaining and saving trees. And I believe he even took a walk in the cove, I think, at one time. So he has a strong appreciation for the natural resource values. What I'm saying is there's been a change in attitude, which we appreciate. The developer is willing to save more down woody material, create more habitat values, even work below that dangerous number, the ordinary high water line, which has been so contentious. On September 30th, here in a week, they will be meeting with Todd Alsbury and other people from Fish and Wildlife to talk about working below that level to create habitat values and places for people that they wouldn't have done before because of the regulatory nature of that. And I believe the agencies involved will give them that opportunity to do that. So in summary, because I know you got lots of things that you might want to discuss with the developers, we appreciate the opportunity to work with these people. We looked at their developments. We had a development discovery tour. Doesn't that sound neat? Here on June 1st, we went and looked at their 3 projects that they showed you. Then we went over to Fairview to look at some things with Commissioner Roth that represent more cottage style and urbanization within a natural, or I should say, wildlife areas. And it was just an incredible opportunity to really see things firsthand. So we believe in these people. and that the League of Conservation Voters so much is interested in being involved with this project that they're going to be hosting a special tour, free kayak tours. You want to see the truth? Get out on a kayak with us on Sunday, October 2nd. We're going to go in the cove with kayaks being provided by Sam Dravo, who's a part of this team. He's a guide and outfitter. If you look at who's on this team right now to help them with their project once it would get into fruition, you've got guides already in place. You have the Tourism Development Council director, I should say the president of the board, who's excited about this. And we just think that it's a good opportunity to continue the rapport that we've developed with these folks in the last 2 years. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jerry. All right.
Lloyd Hill brought along just two drawings of a project that he's proposing in Salem that is exactly what we're talking about, where the developers 4 years ago had condominiums. They've converted those to condominiums for lease. This is not an unusual thing. We've done it in the past, but it's a very large project. And if you take just 1 second, Lloyd might just discuss that just quickly.
Yes, my name's Lloyd Hill. My company is Hill Architects, located at 1914 Willamette Falls Drive in West Lynn. Before I get to the project here, just very briefly, I'm an architect, studied at Cornell and Harvard. I've been practicing since 1980, so 30-some years experience. I'm currently licensed in 12 states. I have been licensed in 19 states in British Columbia. I've done projects in 34 states around the country, Mexico, Spain, and Saipan, encompassing thousands of units of housing, resort projects, office projects, mixed-use developments, and that sort of thing. Ed was explaining to me that there was a concern raised about the strategy of changing the initial phase of this development to develop units that are designed to be condominiums ultimately, but rented out in the initial phases. And apparently there was a statement made by Mr. Janik in his review of the project under risks that this wasn't typical, that typically developers would design a condominium project and only convert it to rental if the condominiums didn't sell and they failed, and it was kind of their exit strategy. Well, I'm here to tell you, having worked on many, many projects over many years, that yes, sometimes that does happen. There have been condominium projects that haven't sold that have been converted to rentals. But this strategy is not unique here. It's being considered. There's a lot of chatter out. The Urban Land Institute has articles published about it. And there are a lot of developers like Ed around the country that are faced with similar challenges. And this is not a unique approach. The project that I have on the wall over here is for a large established development company in Salem, Oregon, Mountain West Financial Group. We've done a couple of projects for them over the years. And about 4 years ago, they acquired a large property which is very strategically located in the city of Salem. If you know Salem, this is Commercial Street here. This is the Willamette River Slough. This is Waterfront Park, which is along the Willamette River and the Willamette River Slough. This is City Hall in Salem. And, the sort of key downtown intersection, this is State Street, so that divides North and South Salem. This site, which encompasses about 12 acres total, was formerly the location of the Boise Cascade, mill down there. The site sold about 3 or 4 years ago. Mountain West and one of their financial partners purchased the site. Their financial partner was in the process of developing a couple of large projects, including a condominium project a little bit down the road here, and they got hammered by the changes in the economy, and that project has experienced problems. And in fact, that particular condominium project, not many of the units sold, and it's been taken over by the lender, and the lender has leased out for rent quite a few of the units there. I know a lot about the condominium development world in Salem, partly by virtue of the fact that my brother, who is the CEO of a large construction development company down there, he and some partners developed 30 units of condos at the same time. And their project, they're just finally selling out. But as a result of the failure of the other project in Salem, my clients, Mountain West Financial, find themselves as the lead developer on a project that they thought they were just partners on. They've spent about 4 years looking at alternatives on the site, and they have recently made a decision to move forward with the project, which we were invited among 4 or 5 architectural teams to develop conceptual plans as part of their visioning process for a paid competition. And these are 3 of the 12 boards that we prepared for that focus a little bit on the housing. The area where there is housing proposed here, this part of the site is currently occupied by a large warehouse structure. It used to in a paper store. It's 3 levels high. It's a very large building. Each floor is 2 acres. You could park 250 cars on each floor. And the development plan that they have right now is to tear the roof off of that and save the top floor, which is a very heavy concrete slab, and the 2 levels below, and to park approximately 500 cars on those 2 levels, and then to develop somewhere between 100 and 120 units of housing on the roof. And their idea, which is very similar to Ed's, is to go ahead and design them so that they will fit the condominium market and be suitable to be sold as condominiums in the future. But for the time being, they're going to rent them out. And they happen to have the benefit of having a comparable just down the street, this other failed condo project, where they know what the market is. Those have rented very effectively at quite attractive rates. So they have very good evidence of the fact that they can be successful there. But the design that we have, you see, over here, the lower level. This is where the 4 rent condominiums are on top of that warehouse structure, and we've designed along the edge of the warehouse structure on the lower 2 levels, where the parking will be, some retail and office space that opens up out to Pringle Creek, which is currently covered with concrete slabs, and we'll be ripping most of those slabs off and opening it up and enhancing the habitat. This is another view from across. There are 2 office buildings with a plaza here, and this view is from more or less here at the corner of this office building looking across, and you see these 4 rent condominiums on the roof of this structure. So I would just like to assure you that this isn't some fly-by-night idea. There are a lot of very experienced, very talented developers out there that are thinking exactly along these same lines. If you build them and rent them out, there's some big advantages in being able to depreciate the costs. You depreciate the costs out over a period of time, and once the costs have been depreciated, then you sell the units. So it makes economic sense to do this, and I think Ed has provided you with a pretty detailed and I think a good summary of some of the benefits to the city of pursuing this approach. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No question actually relates to this.
Okay, Commissioner Neely.
You talked about this being a good model. You didn't actually talk about cases where this has been done. My big concern is this, in terms of the assessed value of the property. Will the assessed value of the property be a condo level assessed value? We're interested in the maximum tax increment we can get. Mm-hmm. And my concern is, are there financial institutions that are going to actually look at this in terms of having the value of condos as opposed to places that are leased out and might be condos in the future?
Ed can correct me, but I believe the numbers that he's put forward to you on the created value, the $32 million, is based on the initial value created at the time the units are designed and rented out. And
it's based on a straightforward appraisal approach, which is an income approach. So the income that is generated, that qualifies for the value. Right now, the cap values, cap value means it's you divide the net operating income by the cap value. Those were at 7 and 8. They're down to even 5 right now. So it pushes the value way up on for rent units. But they will not be the value as a condo. That gets converted at that point in time that you convert it. Ordinarily, we think that we can go from anywhere from 1.4 to 1.6 and maybe even a little higher. It'll kick the value up. So what you get is a lesser increment, but what you really get is putting that piece of property into production at day one and getting all of those tax benefits until you convert it, which won't happen. If we left it sitting there as condos, it would get built out over 5, 6, 7 years and maybe not even started for 3 to 4 years. So it's a real benefit to have that opportunity.
we have other projects that are in environments where there have been challenges for our development clients, and this is not the first time we've been in front of a board, planning commission, city council, redevelopment agency, asking questions about this sort of thing. There are a lot of advantages to having a development that can move forward now. A bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, is an old saw. But we have clients of ours who have hired appraisers to do a net present value analysis for them on what the impact is to the city in fees and taxes and tax increment and so forth. And by proceeding with this project now, you have potential benefits to the city from employment and jobs, and you get the tax increment now. You don't have to wait.
Thank you, Lloyd. Did you want to take just a minute to talk about the projects that you're currently doing? Marathon would just take just a brief moment, and we'll get right into the questions.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is Aaron Wygott. I'm with Marathon Acquisition and Development. I just want to touch on a few things, a little bit of Marathon's background, and then talk about financing for a moment. First on Marathon, as Ed touched on, we're a vertically integrated company. We have a development company, construction company, and a management company, and that gives us a unique ability to control costs, number one, and control every last detail of the project from the early development phases all the way through long-term operation and management, which is really what our goal is typically, to hold the properties that we develop, construct, and manage on a long-term basis. This would be a little bit different with respect to the condo portion of the project because we turn around and sell them, but with the apartment phase, our goal would be to hold that phase for as long as possible. Bob Johnson is the principal and senior partner of Marathon. He wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'm kind of filling in for him to give you guys a little bit of background. Over about 30 years, Bob's built, through Simpson Housing and the Marathon family of companies, around $325 million of apartments mainly, plus condos and retail storefront projects. Marathon Management, which is the management company that we also control and own, has managed probably about $500 million of apartments and retail storefront over that same period of time, 30 years or so. We're very excited about the Cove. We're very excited about partnering with Pacific Property Search, Ed, and Randy. We think the project has tremendous potential. We still have some due diligence to do, but we think it provides lots of benefits for the community. Financially, my job is essentially to run the numbers in these projects, and this project makes sense, and it makes sense at a rental rate that's lower than is projected by Ed and his third-party professionals. So from a financial point of view, I think it makes very good sense and is feasible. from a financing perspective as well. So, and from a physical perspective, I think the project is stunning. It incorporates waterfront, which is unique, which provides amenities to both the residents and the community that most projects don't. We've developed a lot of projects never on waterfront, and this is very exciting because it provides such good built-in amenities to the residents and, again, the community. One thing, financing really hasn't been touched on much, and that's one of the issues that Mr. Janik brought up in his concerns of the ability to actually go out and get a lender to commit to this project. That's one of my roles at Marathon, is structuring the financing and getting lenders to commit. Over the last few years, it hasn't been easy. The developers and the construction companies have had a difficult time over the last few years, like everybody has. However, in the last year or so, or 18 months, the lenders have opened up, especially in the multifamily context. We have 2 projects under construction right now. Both have been financed in about the last 14 months. One is the second phase of our project we call Willamette Estates in Salem. It consists of 358 units, so it's a large project. Second phase is 180 units, which is under construction now, should be complete in about a month or 2. That project, we structured and closed a $20 million construction loan, and that was about 14 months ago. Very difficult time to get that done, and also obtained a $13 million bond for that project, which is also difficult to do these days. But we've done it, and we can do it again. I'm confident in running the numbers that this project we can sell to banks, and banks will finance it. The second project we have underway right now is a mixed-use building that's part of a larger development in Wilsonville, the Fred Meyer Graymore development, which you folks are probably pretty familiar with. The city required a residential component. Graymore didn't want to deal with the residential component, so they came to us to do that component of the project. It's 52 units over parking and storefront, 5,000 square foot of storefront. We just closed that loan a few months ago, and that was about $6.2 million. So there's money out there. The banks really have lots of money, and they need to get it out the door, and multifamily happens to be the one segment, thankfully for us, that the banks really want to get the money out the door into. So I'm confident that on the waterfront portion especially, which I think is the phase that makes sense to do first, we can get lenders to commit to the the $20 million range of financing that it would take to get it done. So given that we've closed those 2 projects over the last 14 months, I think this one can be done. Our experience over the last 30 years, combined with Ed and Randy's specific knowledge of this project and our growing knowledge as we dig deeper and deeper into it, it's quite feasible, and I think we could get it up out of the ground, and we can get it done fairly quickly. So we have a little more due diligence to do. Those 2 components are really the infrastructure budget, whether or not the infrastructure can be done for the $7 million. Like Ed mentioned, we did get some bids back. Those bids were encouraging. So if that can be done, I saw that as the biggest hurdle. If that can be done, then I think the rest of the project would go fairly quickly. The second due diligence point we're really working on is what the market rents are going to be. But again, I'm running the numbers at 10 to 12 cents less than what Ed and these guys projected it, and it still works out. So at that reduced rate compared to what a third-party market study produced, I think it's quite feasible, because at that lower rate we can get it financed, and if we were to get the higher rate, then it's going to be that much easier to get done. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer questions at any point. Maybe I should have, I don't know if you guys want to contact us directly over the next few months, but if you want to, I am available. I know Ed had offered that up, so I'll find a way to have my contact information circulated to you guys, so you can contact me if you have any questions. So, are there any questions now? No? Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron. Just one point, Nancy, is it okay if I continue this discussion here? Okay. All right. Let's kind of keep in mind our time here this evening, too, so to see if we want to get through the whole agenda, too. So, Commissioner Sita.
Just a quick question for Ed. I'm not clear on where the Sladen partnership fits into this anymore, because I have a recollection, didn't they actually own the property behind the shopping center at this point? And what is the status of that?
It closed on the Parker Phase 1 property, which is 11.58 acres. They own it. They paid Parker about $3.5 million. They owe him an additional 1.3, which is due in April of 13. We have a tentative deal with them to buy that. When they exited, part of our termination approach there, which they're still in, but we have the ability to not only buy that, but to take them out in total. We've negotiated those terms. So effectively, we will control that property, and we will want to build it out as a second round of vertical production.
If I could just add one thing, we're looking at this project and being involved in all phases from beginning to end. We're not just looking at doing the waterfront units. We would want to do from the beginning of the infrastructure all the way through the office and mixed-use portions as well. So.
Okay.
So,
All right, Commissioner Roth.
Okay, I have a few questions, and I don't know if I'm understanding everything, so correct me as I go along here. I would like to know what kind of an assurance we have of conversion of these rental condominiums to actual sales condominiums and a timeline for that.
Yeah, there isn't one. If we had that crystal ball, we'd know when to actually build them out as condos. So really, if you look at what the incentive is from our point of view, it's nice to own it to get the income. But if you take and you look at the value and the potential return at a future date, it would be really an incentive for us to convert. So when that market turns around, that's what we will do. We have no idea when that'll turn around. Our expectation, if you heard me on that in 2010, that it might be 2 or 3 years, it still might be 2 or 3 years. But one of the things that you have in this particular site is a term that one of our analysts gave us, that you have a competitive advantage because of the water. That can sell, like the Tidewater property, when things were upside down, that project still sold. This has that same kind of appeal, and by doing it as a quality project and having it finished to the level that we will do it, it will be a real opportunity because all the units will be in place. What we will do, we'll go through and modify the platting. We'll do what's called diagrammetrics, which takes the airspace and defines that, and then we'll actually do it progressively on a sale approach, probably a building at a time. So it really, I think they would go off the line very quickly, but you have to be in that market. And the nice thing about building it out right now is that we have all of them in place. We're not going to spend 18 months, 12 months building each phase, because you could not build all of them at once as condos. Nobody would finance it. So we can build it all now and have it totally ready so we can convert it when the market's there.
I'm a little bit more pessimistic about timelines, I guess, than you are, but for an economy turnaround is what I'm meaning. But and I'm also thinking of condominiums in Gresham that were built on the golf course and then rented out to be converted back to condominiums that eventually went into derelict condition and just look really bad now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Janik was talking about. They designed them as condos. They put all the upgrades to the interiors. Then you're actually upside down. It doesn't pencil. It will go back to the lender because you've got too much money in it. Those finishes that I showed you on the condos versus the apartments, that's a phenomenal amount of money that goes into it. So when you convert, and having done it and having done this kind of thing, you have that one guy there that coordinates that. You upgrade those, you go in and you slam them out and get it done at a higher quality, and that buyer basically is getting what they want. They get the colors, they get the finishes, they get the appliances. So it's a very positive approach to doing it. But when you start out with a high-end condo and you try to rent it, it usually doesn't work.
Yeah. See, my concern is, say in my timeline, you go 10 years down the road, you're converting a 10-year-old building, how appealing will that be to people?
We've converted 20-year-old buildings. If you go through and you pick the points that when we converted part of Sweegle Point, we had to redo part of the roofs. We did the deckings. So we went through and did exterior qualifications beyond the interiors. But people would come in and spend $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 on a $200,000, $250,000 unit to just do the insides and really upgrade them. So if you build the quality in, all the structural part, as I've discussed earlier, then the time frame isn't a tough deal. And I don't think we're looking at 10 years. I don't have that crystal ball again, but it's to our benefit and to your benefit to actually convert those.
Second question, I'm really not sure about this part, but addressing Mr. Janik's concerns about by changing the phasing. In the original plan, the $7 million was to be advanced after phase 1 and 2. Is that correct, or after phase 1?
No, there were three preconditions to releasing the $7 million. One was that we record a loan for the 210. Mm-hmm. We have all the land uses done, and we pull a foundation, not build, pull a foundation. So that was the three conditions. This isn't any different. There is a difference in that, and I think that Janik has a large background in this, and so do I. We can figure out a way to bring the lender to the table where they'll have a security interest, and basically we'll be doing the same type of thing, but it'll be a little bit different, and it'll take some working through with the lender.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Neely.
I got about 3 questions, I think. Are you intending to maintain the ownership?
Pardon me?
Are you intending to maintain the ownership of the buildings?
Yes.
And how do we? My concern is a little bit less than about you, but if you sell the buildings to somebody else, what's the guarantee the maintenance will occur?
Well, we under the DDA, there is a mandatory maintenance agreement that has to be put together with the city, and then that is required to be recorded against the property. So that is something that will be a contractual relationship and an obligation. So I don't see that as a problem. My intent is to stay in the project. I know the quality of Marathon's past projects very intimately, and that we were trying to buy a large piece of their completed product that we wanted to actually convert. So we'll be in the project.
For the sake of time, I don't expect answers to these next questions now, but you come later. I can't remember at any point, and maybe we did when you were here, discuss the impact of Highway 205 noise on the area and how that's being dealt with. I don't want to answer that at this point because of time, but it's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
And if there's something you want to refer to me to that's
yes,
fine.
I do. I'd like to go back to the PowerPoint if I can find it here. And,
well, my preference is not to do it now.
Oh, okay.
Well, because we got a commission meeting coming up, we got one more item.
Okay, just one quick answer. Units from $300,000 to $4 million, Tidewater. Railroad track directly contiguous to it, and the 114 freeway. Triple glazing of the glass. You don't hear anything. We designed the frontage of these elevations so that there's actually partial walls instead of it being totally open. That'll break it. And then all of the living area is to the back, and part of the bedrooms are to the back side. So we've covered it.
I was wondering, we might want to get a staff recommendation on how to proceed. I don't feel too comfortable about committing ourselves to the DDP until we have some input from staff.
I think that we might be all in agreement with that there's probably no decision this evening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if this was 5 years ago, I had $7 million. I'd write you a check for $7 million right now. This is a great project. But we've got to make sure we're kind of, especially with all the economic conditions and stuff, and we're kind of dealing with taxpayer money here and stuff. So we want to make sure we're going to do this right. So we're going to need a little more time on this. So
if I just may real quick,
yes,
I think there's a couple things here. In terms of direction, would it be helpful to have Ed and Randy come back at the next Urban Renewal Commission to answer more questions? If you have questions that come up in between, then you can certainly email those to me, and we can pass those along to try and address some of the concerns that we just hadn't had time to tonight. I don't know that this, in the ideal world, it'd be nice to have a continuation or an extension of the conditional reinstatement agreement. I don't know how the commission feels about that. I'll leave that up to you. We can certainly help you discuss that if that's something you'd like to consider. Another issue that Ed was talking about is that we really have two processes going on right now. We have the DDA, the conditional reinstatement agreement, and then concurrently we have a land use process that needs to occur at some point. As Ed was discussing, we approved the concept master plan. That's the overarching land use document, and it identified all the phases in there. And so then they need to come in for what we call the detailed development plan, and that's the specific building design, articulation, parking lot, landscaping. And they have approval for phases 1 and 2, which is all of the infrastructure and the landscaping and the grading. We're going to need to make some amendments to that. They have approval for the apartments. Now, because of this change in phasing, we need to go in and amend the land use approvals plus start the land use process on the new condo project. And that's where the discussion was that I can't accept a land use application until the property owner signs the application. Now, is that something that you'd be interested in having them bring back as well at the next meeting to show you the changes? They do. Signing one doesn't give away anything on the DDA. They are two separate processes that need to occur. So that's just something to think about. But we'd be happy to try and start that process because, they can run concurrently if the commission chooses to move in that direction.
Okay. I agree with the mayor that tonight is maybe a little bit premature for that, but I would propose that it be a specific agenda item at the next meeting.
Okay.
And just so I'm clear, the bringing them back to talk about the development agreement.
Well, I think
DDA.
to talk about the DDP as an agenda item, it would be very helpful to have them here. Yeah.
Okay, so for the land use, and then we'll follow up this conversation on the DDA as well. Okay.
Now, do we also want Mr. Janik here to respond to this?
I'm not sure we'll be able to get through. Well, our goal is to address them all and come back to you with a clean document.
All right.
That's why we requested some additional time.
Okay.
So we request a little bit more time on that.
And on a land use issue, I don't know if it'd be helpful to have the city attorney here, who is a land use expert. But I'm comfortable leaving that to your discretion.
I mean, and just more of a narrative here. I mean, the changes aren't. They're very minor. I mean, the real crux, the real discussion is in the DDA.
Okay.
It's more of a timing issue, and then the DDA is really dealing with the financing, the increment, and some other issues that Mr. Janik pointed out.
Just one quick comment. As I mentioned, we have committed another $800,000. That's not all that we have to finish up with to finish this work. We have a partner sitting here with us that wants to know that we, in fact, do have a deal. So the sooner that we can get to the point of saying that, you guys accept this extension, is the better off it is. I don't like the idea of going all the way up till December. I'd like to do whatever it takes. We're 100% available to work with staff so that we could accelerate that process.
And one thing to add to that point is you can get financing these days, but it takes a lot of time. So the earlier we can go to the banks with a done deal, the sooner we're going to get started. And that's a precondition to starting the infrastructure. So if we're looking at April, we need to be going to the banks sooner rather than later. And that's tough to do without a deal put together.
Okay. I think we have some direction here, Tony.
Yes, thank you.
I don't know if there's anything on our part we need to do. We're just going to say move ahead.
Thank you.
Okay. And Ed, as you and I talked, I'd sure like to see that office building going up, but there's 400 jobs, I believe, and that would be my preference, so.
Well, that's one of the things we'd like to really go out to the market. We haven't gone to the brokerage community and said, all right, here's this real opportunity, bring us somebody. We usually like to do that work ourselves, but we will go to the brokerage community as soon as we nail this down and try to push that, because it would be nice to pull that out of the ground at the same time.
It's right on the water.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to item, what are we on here?
Conduit.
Oh, conduit infrastructure for future fiber optic and other stuff here.
I'd like to make a comment.
Yes.
Something was attributed to me in the Oregon City News that actually should be given credit to Paul Edgar. He's the person that brought up this idea that it was not me.
Good.
So I know that, and I'm sorry the press doesn't.
Well, there you go.
Okay, so is this, who's this, Tony also? Are you doing this, or?
I'm going to speak to this one.
Yes.
Yes.
This is,
Hello.
might introduce yourself so
I'm
we all
Eric Wargren. I'm a project engineer
Yeah.
with the Public Works Department, and I'm filling in today for Nancy Crushauer, who's on vacation.
Okay.
She'll be back tomorrow. She asked me to speak to this one. As many of you know, we've got the first phase of our Main Street work underway, and the phase 2 project is complete with design at this point, and we're planning to go out to bid at the end of the month. We've got an opportunity to include additional conduit in, we've got lighting trenches for our lighting as part of the project that extend from 5th to 10th along Main Street on both sides of the street. And we feel that we have an opportunity to put a conduit in for future use, future fiber optic or communication needs, along with associated vaults, of course, at the intersections and at mid-block to be able to service potential customers in the future. So we just feel that it's a very cost-effective way if you already have the trench included in the plans. Adding the conduit seems like the right thing to do if that's the direction that we intend to take. So the staff request that authorization of Urban Renewal Commission to budget $30,000 for the additional conduit installation from the Commission's contingency fund is the request today. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Commissioner Nocita.
Okay. Question, I guess, Tony. I direct it to both of you, but we had this similar discussion of a request for the URA contingency fund regarding the Ermitinger House, and I raised the point that the city, as a proportion of its budget, has a higher amount of contingency funding than the URA does. I know that there is an agenda item tonight, later on during the City Commission meeting, regarding a request also. And I'm just wondering how the proportions of what is being requested from this body's contingency as opposed to the City Commission's contingency, because I feel a little bit protective of the contingency fund on the Urban Renewal Commission because of we devoted contingency funds to the vision question, and I keep seeing requests for contingency funding from the URA, and I'm a little nervous about it. So I just want to talk about the balance of requests between this body and the city's contingency fund.
Well, I think if Mr. Wimmer could come up and talk about the city commission request and where those funds are coming from. And then this was brought back tonight in response to some discussion by Urban Renewal at the last meeting.
Yeah.
And so we just identified some funds to be taken out of that contingency for the Urban Renewal Commission to be put forward towards this project. But then Mr. Wimmer can talk a little bit about where the other money comes from the general fund.
I'm not sure what the breakdown, how it became 30 and 50, or 30 and 75. It was like a third and two-thirds, roughly, I guess. When we're talking about contingency, I think there's a giant misconception of what contingency is. Contingency is not just extra money. Contingency is that's what your beginning balance is for next year. So every time we hit the general fund for 100,000, there's a position, or a part of a position. So it's almost like we've been hearing contingency. It's just extra money that we got we could spend this year. So the general fund does have about 1.3 million in contingency. A year ago, it had a $4.8 million balance. Of course, part of it was because we loaned money to South Forks, and so that'll come back. But so anyway, just because general fund has 1.3 million, and then there's like 100 or 200,000 in urban renewal. You're not really comparing apples and apples. So.
Yeah.
And actually, the 75,000 is not from general fund anyway. It's from the cable TV fund.
Could that amount from the cable TV source be increased?
Probably not. It's tapping it pretty hard.
What's that?
It's tapping it. The cable TV fund only has like a $65,000 fund balance and or a contingency plus an extra $50,000 for capital outlay, which is going against this. But so the total cable TV fund is only like $140,000 budget compared to like the $18 million or $12 million for the.
Well, why don't we ask now then, if we use 75 out of that cable fund and it has 150, what's the remainder devoted to from that cable fund? Is it already spoken for? Are the remaining funds already spoken for when you factor in the 75,000 that's going to be requested
No.
Later on tonight?
No.
Okay. How much play? How much play?
There's
Play is there?
40,000 left.
There'd be still 40,000.
Right. So it could absorb it, but wipe it out. Plus, there's some other things going on with the cable TV, with what Westland's doing, and things that may have an effect on that down the road too, depending on what we want to do with cable TV.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Edgar.
I tried to push this, and I think it's really very good, and I was very happy with the city manager coming up with a plan for bringing money in jointly from the cable access fees and a small amount coming in from the Urban Renewal Commission. It's just, this is the time now to make it happen. The ground is tore up. I'd like to move at this moment that we approve this authorization and with the clock ticking and just get on with life.
I would second that.
All right, question?
I'd like to hear the remaining comments before we vote.
Oh, yes, sorry. Oh, you're here.
It took me an hour to get
Commissioner
from one side of
Walters.
town, one side of the city to the other. It
You're
took
on
1 hour.
213.
So
All right.
I don't
Commissioner
know
Walters,
if
all
anyone
right.
else got stuck in that traffic, but I sure did.
Okay.
So I support this project. I think it's great timing. That makes a lot of sense. What I'm concerned about is that the companies that provide the service, the fiber optic to the customers, typically charge quite a bit of money for this type of service, and they would not have incurred this cost because it would have been a public investment. And I'm wondering what kinds of assurances or what kind of agreement will we have with the service provider to ensure that this public investment does not turn into an inordinate or inappropriate private benefit.
Good point.
Does the city attorney know what we're talking about by any chance?
I'm listening. I'm just.
It's my understanding that if and when the franchises are wanting to go into the conduit, we have a large enough conduit and we have an interduct system that will allow for multiple franchisees to be in there. And so, in other words, I guess that would create the competition and then therefore keep the prices lower. I don't know as far as I can't speak to trying to get the dollars back from the franchise.
Well,
It's yours, yes.
So that's could be a revenue source, and we would recover at some point.
Oh, I like that.
That's a great idea.
You can't affect existing franchises, but you can deal prospectively with incoming needs and uses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Question?
Commissioner Neely,
No.
you done?
It was the
Okay.
same question, so, yeah, that's fine.
Question? Okay, I guess we can take a vote, correct?
Commissioner Mum? Aye. Commissioner Roth?
Aye.
Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
All right.
Commissioner Edgar?
Aye.
Chair Walters?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Right.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Paul, you can sleep tonight.
Put out a press release.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. I think we're done for the evening. Is that correct? Minutes. Oh,
Minutes.
we have to, let me back out an agenda here. Okay, here we go. Okay, we need a motion for the minutes of the September 7th meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Mum?
Aye.
Commissioner Roth? Commissioner Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterson?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
All right.
And Commissioner Edgar, excuse me?
Aye.
And Chair Walters?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, we can adjourn?
We have a
Just
one.
real quick, one thing, and I realize that we're out of time, so this we'll bring this back next time. One thing that we'd like the commission to think about, staff has been talking about trying to move the meetings along just because of the condensed time that we have here, and we were wondering about future agenda items, if that wouldn't be something appropriate to move to a work session type setting where the future agenda items could be discussed with a little bit more time at those work sessions rather than taking up time on the night of your meeting. So we will bring that back at the next meeting, but
Yes.
just
put it out there so you can think about it, or unless you want to make a decision.
That's great.
Aye.
I love it. That's a great idea.
Sounds like a pirate.
Great. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Kind of like a pirate, yeah.
This is Talk Like a Fireman, right?
No,
Okay.
that was Monday,
That
I
was
think.
Monday.
The 19th.
Thanks, Aaron. Good
Well,
seeing you
the whole
tonight.
week,
All right. We adjourn.